GTM stories
Forgot.
is, yeah. So going to the start, Jess is definitely the start of the show. What we're looking to do with GTM stories is invite industry leader, and we're obviously opening very, very strong here to learn about their personal stories, how they drive growth in their companies. And Jess, it's so lovely to have you today with us. So I'd love to start with you sharing a bit about your background and journey into Web3.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Brandon, I'm not sure such a good introduction is great because it sets me up for inevitable disappointment, I think. So maybe you can tone it down next time. But really excited to be here. I've been part of the what was BD3 and obviously now GTM3 for since pretty early on, I think, and I'm a big fan of the community that you've built. I find it like useful on a daily basis, and it's awesome to be a part of. So thank you for having me. Um, I guess if I go back in time a little bit, Asaf, to kind of what brought me to be here. I started life a long time ago now in investment banking. I don't tell people that too often. And spent some time in private equity, but got interested in crypto back in 2013, 2014. And what hooked me was that as an undergraduate, I'd written a lot of papers about the history of monetary systems. And I studied economics. So when I learned about Bitcoin, this was for me like monetary system evolution in real time. So that's what kind of got me really interested. And I spent a couple more years still in private equity, but on the sidelines, dabbling in crypto until it became too much of a distraction from my day job. So I left PE the end of 2015 and I'm trying to figure out like what I wanted to do. I had a big interest in the art world, and the Ethereum community in London at that time was like heavily overlapping with the art world. There were just a ton of artists who were involved in the Ethereum project and working on really interesting conceptual art mostly. And so I ended up writing a master's thesis on the applications of blockchain for the art world. And that led me to build my first project in the space, which was called Codex. We were using NFTs really just before the ERC 721 standard emerged to track the provenance of physical artwork. So we worked with a bunch of galleries, auction houses, things like that. It taught me a lot about being an entrepreneur, taught me a lot about the art world, which is a fascinating industry, but a very, very slow moving one and one that wasn't quite ready for this technology at the time. Although today we see a lot of projects in that space, which is really cool. After that, I joined a company called Checkout.com, which is a payments company, a little bit like Stripe, but with a real enterprise focus. And wore a number of hats there from chief of staff, interim head of product, but spent a lot of my time focusing on the crypto industry. So we used to do fiat payment processing for a lot of crypto companies. So if you went onto a crypto exchange and bought crypto with your debit card, for example, like this could well be our rails at the back end. Also launched the first like stablecoin acquiring settlement solution for our merchants so that we could settle them in USDC and a few other like crypto payments projects. But being crypto in a much bigger financial institution has its downsides, namely that often you're just defending the fact that crypto exists to some people who don't really like it or understand it. And Checkout had grown from a couple hundred people when I joined to over 2,000. So I was ready for a new challenge. And that's when I got introduced to Pedro, who was the founder of WalletConnect. And I joined the team back in September 23, took over as CEO in February last year. I think it may be my 1 year anniversary as CEO this week. And since then, we've had a really exciting journey. It's a project that I love. We get to partner with every chain, every wallet, every app, every builder in Web3, which is a rare and really privileged position. So yeah, really enjoy it.
That's quite an amazing story, and I've been tracking WalletConnect and kind of the split into Reown and the foundation. I'm personally very, very curious about what it's like to step in as a CEO, kind of stepping as a non-co-founder to leading kind of a very prominent organization, kind of a landmark in the space of Web3. What was that like?
It's interesting because I think in Web3, there's relatively few like non-founder leadership teams. And when I took on the role of CEO, I like searched far and wide for people who could give me advice about what that would be like. Also, my first time as a CEO. Um, and I found a bunch of instances, obviously outside of Web3, but very few inside. Although there were a couple of people who were super helpful as I made that transition. And I think the consistent piece of advice from everybody was just like alignment on vision. I'd been already part of the team for a couple of months. I could see very clearly what was working and what wasn't working. I think the reason that they hired me in the first place was also clear. It was a team of entirely almost engineers when I joined, very little of many other functions, but they built something that was really incredible. And so I think for me, the most important thing was that Pedro and I were really aligned on the vision. He wasn't stepping back from the project. He's still, as you know, like heavily involved and runs the foundation today. And so for me, it was just about having a ton of conversations to make sure that I shared his vision. Where we disagreed, we had a good path forward of how we would resolve those differences, so that I could kind of help bring his dreams to life, really. I think I really view WalletConnect as his baby. He had invested years and years and blood, sweat, and tears into it, to tremendous kind of results. And so it was a little bit nerve-wracking, to be honest, taking on a project like that. But I think Pedro and I had built a great relationship and we're very much on the same page, and that made it much easier.
That's amazing. And if I'm looking at the past year, so much had changed. So it used to be WalletConnect, and then the foundation was split. There was the rebranding to Reown, a very successful fundraise. And I guess that's just one part of the bigger vision that you were sharing. Can you share more about the overall vision that you and Pedro kind of discussed and that you're currently leading with Reown?
Yeah, so if you go back to 2018 when WalletConnect was founded, the purpose, the original like functionality of WalletConnect was to be able to connect apps and wallets. It's the QR code that people are familiar with when they log into a Web3 application. And over time, it became not a weak point because we never had any technical issues, but I think like a conceptual weak point. If you think about Web3, where you have decentralized applications, all this interoperability, you have self-custodial wallets, and yet all of this messaging was passing through the WalletConnect server, which for quite a long time actually just used to sit in Pedro's bedroom, which didn't give many people a huge degree of confidence in the resilience. And especially when we started bringing on people like Fireblocks to trade institutional funds, and then you think about this bedroom-based server. And so his vision really all along was that that could be something that was permissionless and decentralized, such that WalletConnect, although we don't censor the apps that are part of the network, we don't censor the transactions, but inevitably, I think like living within the Web3 philosophy, we wanted that to be decentralized and permissionless. At the same time, we had built already a bunch of SDKs for app and wallet builders. Primary functionality gives them access into that network, but also had a whole bunch of other stuff in there. And so there was a little bit of kind of confusion about like what WalletConnect was, which piece we wanted to decentralize, who we were as a brand. People often just thought about us as that connectivity, despite some of the other functionality that we were building. And so that was really the prompt for us to say, let's split these two things out from a brand perspective. Let's have the WalletConnect network as people know it. Let's put the stewardship of that network into the foundation, so that over time we can decentralize it both from a technical perspective, and we did that last year. We now have 16 different third-party node operators running the network for us, but also decentralize the governance of that. We did our first like token holder vote this week on the establishment of the UX Council, for example, and there's lots more coming there. So that was the sort of the journey for the WalletConnect network. But then at the same time, we had a bunch of other SDKs, onboarding tools, embedded wallets. We more recently launched on-ramp solutions and swaps for app developers. And so this is then what became Reown as the sort of the developer-facing toolkit building company that partners with the network.
That's such an incredible journey in taking a company like WalletConnect, which was such a centralized piece and so many applications, into decentralization. I bet it was not just a decision that was kind of you and Pedro kind of making of that together. WalletConnect had investors like from day one, and continues to grow in that. Can you share what were the discussions within decision makers within the company of taking this company and making it fully decentralized and embodying this vision?
I think that there had always been like a shared understanding from investors that eventually we would want to decentralize the network. There was also an awful lot of demand from people who were using it. And I think for us, that was like the most definitive factor was that we had a bunch of partners, wallets particularly, especially some of the more institutional wallets who use WalletConnect to allow, their big institutions to access DeFi, for example, other apps who care deeply about privacy and censorship resistance. And so when I joined actually, and I was meeting a lot of customers for the first time, a lot of people were like, "Are you guys going to decentralize this?" Because we feel like increasing risk from having this like relatively small company, managing all of that connectivity. And touch wood, like the network had never gone down, although we've made a lot of technical improvements and it certainly wasn't perfect. But there was still this kind of idea that there was some risk in having this centralized version of WalletConnect. And so that was what really prompted it. And during the first kind of few months, we got a lot of feedback. What should that look like? How would we do it? We'd already built the technical implementation of that. So the version of the database that could be decentralized was already in production from March of last year. And so then it was really a decision about, okay, how do we onboard the right third-party node operators to that and gradually decentralize it? It's a little bit like building an aeroplane in mid-flight because people were, using it and but that went pretty smoothly. And I think people are really excited to see that like next phase of the journey. We've had really high engagement from all sorts of people around that, more requests to run nodes than we could possibly imagine. And the goal eventually is that we'll make that permissionless. We have a paper coming out at the end of this year or later this year with like the first version of the permissionless design for that. So eventually the idea would be that anybody can run a WalletConnect node. And I think that's a really exciting prospect as well.
That's amazing. I remember having a conversation with Steven, the CMO of Reown, and chatting to him about marketing challenges. This is something that I'm personally really interested in as one of the co-founders of Addressable. And I was asking him, like, what's the biggest challenge? And he said, well, everybody in this industry is pretty much fighting about brand awareness and who's being heard. Where's the mind share for that? We're trying to do rebranding. We're trying to change how people are thinking about us, which is incredibly challenging. I'm not sure anybody in this space changed this entire communication of who we are, plus becoming decentralized, plus changing the brand to Reown with AppKit and WalletKit. What was it like taking this vision and communicating it to the users, to investors, to everybody in the market? With that being kind of such a dramatic change?
Honestly, like very nerve-wracking because rebranding companies is a real mission. But I think it was clear to us that we needed to do it, partly because this separation was taking place, and partly because we really wanted to, on the Reown side, focus our communications and make sure that we were a true developer-facing brand in the way that WalletConnect is actually, although it's distributed via developers, is much more of a consumer recognized brand. So we knew we had to do it. And I think the hardest thing was kind of coming up with the name. Like, what do you call a company? Anybody who's ever started a company has done this. I remember hours and hours starting codex of thinking about this. And Stephen actually was the one who ultimately came up with the name Reown. We were on a company retreat in Lisbon, and we had given everybody a copy of Read Write Own by Chris Dixon as the like one of the gifts for the company offsite. And so we were jamming on this idea of like taking back the ownership of the internet and what that should really mean. Then there's all the like mini logistics things, like can you find the URLs and can you do all this sort of stuff? But when Stephen came up with the idea of Reown, something just like felt right. I was like, having looked at 1,000 other names, I was like, okay, which is really about like putting the ownership of the internet back in the hands of individuals rather than in the hands of giant Web2 corporations. And we literally like announced it to the team that evening at dinner. And then the next, we'd bought the URLs already on our mobile phones. And like the next day, kind of everything swished into action. And we were super lucky, have an amazing brand designer. We also worked with some other partners to kind of like reimagine what that brand should be visually. And from a narrative perspective, and how that would work with WalletConnect as well, because it's really important for us that those two brands, that they shouldn't be the same, but ultimately we're all working towards the same vision, which is about creating better user experience for everybody who's using Web3. So that was the rebrand journey, which was pretty fun.
That's wonderful. And you were touching earlier about the developer voice and the key audience of WalletConnect then now Reown being developers. These are the people that are looking at the product, embedding it, thinking about the decentralization of that. And you were also mentioning that WalletConnect, I mean, before you stepped in, was 30 engineers. These were the people. And I have this recollection in my mind that I saw Pedro at the side event meeting a user, which, I mean, this is amazing. I mean, you rarely come across users, and the talk was so technical. Tell me how you implemented the product. Was this version 1 or version 2? How did you implement it? It was so like two engineers speaking to one another, and you were coming from a background of business and private equity and stepping into this space and kind of taking over, speaking to engineers, now being the face of Reown. What is that like stepping into that?
I guess I've had like the privilege and sometimes the challenge of working alongside engineers for a really long time. Had a technical co-founder with Codex at Wallet. Sorry, at Checkout. I worked really closely. I led product for a while. Worked really closely with our engineering counterparts there. So I think it's I'd certainly had a lot of experience of being developer facing. It's definitely like a bit of a change. And I think it's especially for a company that's had an engineering, an engineer as the CEO for a really long time, it's different to bring in somebody with a profile like mine. But for me, I think one thing is just really consistent, whether you're building for developers or building for consumers or for merchants in the case of payments. And that is like the only way to build great products is to listen to your users and to have empathy with them. And so whilst I can't necessarily dive into like the minutia of the technical details, I learned really hard and as fast as I could, as much as my technical capability allows me. But when I meet developers, what I get so excited about is hearing about what they're building, and the challenges that they have, how we can help them. When they get really technical, I bring in the people in my team who are great at the really technical stuff. But for me, it's also just about the stories that we're here to do. And I have been in and around crypto now for a really long time. I deeply believe in what we're trying to do as an industry. And so I just get so much pleasure when I speak to developers, maybe less so about like which version of the app kit they're using, but more about like what problem they're trying to solve. How are they bringing joy to users? How are they bringing more people into Web3, what those pain points are, how we might be able to help them. Because I think that that's really what most people are here to do is to build great stuff. And so I can definitely like empathize and engage with developers and maybe in a slightly different way than Pedro could, but in a way that brings me like a lot of joy to see, because I think hearing those stories about our users is ultimately like what creates our business as well.
This is so inspiring about the ability to kind of step into new domains and kind of embrace this empathy about listening to people and ultimately be able to better understand them. And I think I shared with you that I managed to trick Brendan into thinking that I'm a longtime marketer is operating in this space, because it's a lot about assimilating with the audiences that you're working with. And it's very clear that you're leading the company to success. There's the recent fundraise that Reown announced, a Series B led by Kraken Ventures, by 1KX and USV. But one thing about that really kind of popped up to me is the participation of Shopify, kind of a well-known non-Web3 entity stepping inside, which to me was super exciting to see companies like that stepping into this space. Can you share more about the fundraise and specifically kind of the Shopify story and how they're viewing the space that's being built?
Yeah, I think I was really fortunate to inherit an awesome cap table when I joined the company. We already had excellent board members, really great investors on board. And so as we approached the fundraising last year, it was really like, how do we augment that, maintain a really like useful and valuable investor base? And how do we think about like the future of what we want to build from a product perspective? One of my theses is that we're going to see an awful lot more adoption of crypto or of blockchain specifically as well within traditional financial services, within payments, the whole stablecoin explosion that is happening, this kind of Cambrian moment that we have right now, I think is testament to that. And so during the course of last year, we had been doing an awful lot more work with payments companies. Stripe launched with WalletConnect so that users can do crypto pay-ins for goods and services with Stripe merchants, for example, and several others. So we'd been kind of doing a lot of thinking, a lot of product work already about the payment space, the more traditional financial space, as well as obviously all of our existing customer bases across Web3. And so I think that was a big motivator for Shopify to join the B. We also had Standard Chartered Ventures, which is owned by Standard Chartered Bank, come in, and several other more like Web2 type investors who I think could really see that all of crypto today either sits in a centralized exchange or in a self-custodial wallet. And having that self-custodial wallet ecosystem be able to interact with traditional financial services is crucial for the future of Web3. And so if you're thinking about accepting payments from a user or managing identity as part of like a self-custodial wallet, then the value of the WalletConnect network that allows you to plug in seamlessly to all of the self-custodial wallets rather than needing to work just with one or two ultimately is meeting the users where they are. And so I think for them that was a big motivation to join the cap table, which was awesome. They've been great, and we've been already like looking at different product things alongside several of those investors. So yeah, great to have them. And then of course we had a bunch of other more Web3 investors as well, Kraken Ventures, Crypto.com, a lot of the wallets that we partner really closely with who also participated, which is great because for me that's just a testimony to like the value that they place on what we do and the partnerships that we have and kind of continuing that deep relationship.
That's brilliant, and I think seeing investors both from the new and emerging Web3, but also from traditional Web2 coming together, I think this is exciting news, particularly for Reown, but I think for the industry in general. This I think brings a lot of good news to a lot of people that are building in Web3. And I'm also personally curious. You have a board of investors and the investors themselves looking at the company, it's very obvious that Reown is very dominant in the space. It's kind of the go-to tool for so many developers. And obviously grabbing the land is a huge thing to do with kind of capturing the attention, capturing the adoption. Are there chats at the given point in time about longer term monetization? Obviously, there's the token launch, maybe that's a part of that. There's the payment and the Stripe, which that can be a part of that. What does the conversation with the board, with investors, or even in your mind, looking at the vision looks like with regards to monetization?
I think it's a tough one because you have a range of investors who really believe just in the kind of network effects that we saw from like the Silicon Valley companies of yesteryear, where you can spend years and years and years building a network and then figure out how to monetize it. And to some degree, kind of WalletConnect has followed that path. We've never monetized since it started in 2018. It's all been about building and growing the network. At the same time, I believe that businesses should be able to make money if they're providing valuable goods and services to people, and also that VC investment is not like the only way to fund a business. And so I think we've landed in a great position, which is that we know that the token is necessary from a decentralization perspective. It's really important that we can incentivize people to run nodes, to support the infrastructure, and to use as the kind of coordination mechanism. And so you can sort of think about that as the monetization model for the network. There's no fees on that today, but we've been working closely with partners to figure out like what the right fee mechanism might be, especially as we introduce new functionality at the network level that provides even more value than what we can deliver today. So I think eventually we will see fees switched on the network. It's definitely a part of how we think about the WalletConnect component of the stack. And then it's about like how do we monetize other components? And I think what's really important for me is that we don't lose sight of the bigger picture. It's not about like optimizing revenue today and just starting to charge everybody. Sure, we could probably make money by doing that, but I think that the power of the network and the power of the community that we have is really important. And it might seem big because WalletConnect is sort of like everywhere in Web3, but actually like the Web3 is still so small. And if you believe like I do that like crypto will be touching every corner of the internet at some point, there's still a huge amount of growth for us to achieve in terms of like powering all of those interactions between today wallets and Web3, but tomorrow wallets and the internet as a whole. And so as we approach monetization, and we're introducing a paid tier this year for AppKit, which has a bunch of premium features, analytics, all sorts of other things involved with that. That's about like where we can add additional value, where people want to be able to pay for it. I think it helps sharpen the mind and make sure that we're building the right things. And I often talk about this kind of like conceptual product market fit that you might have when you're giving something away for free. But when you start to charge for it, that's really like the test of whether you have product market fit. And so we will be introducing some more kind of like paid functionality this year, but the core of WalletConnect and the core of the WalletKit and AppKit SDKs will remain free, because I think really that's I view WalletConnect as a public good. That's why we've done the token. It's why we're sort of decentralizing it. And I want to make sure that it can continue to support the growth of Web3, not by having to kind of like charge for what it does today, but by building a really strong ecosystem around it.
That's brilliant. And as we're headed to the end of time before a Q&A, if you can share where people can follow Reown, learn more about the vision. There's obviously like the big WalletConnect Eat Denver. I know a lot of the people over here are planning to attend. Where can they stay updated on Reown's progress?
Yeah, definitely please join us at WalletCon. I'm going to throw this in the chat here. We had about 1,000 people join us in Bangkok and like amazing partners and speakers and announcements and stuff. So if you're in Denver, definitely please come. You can find me in the GTM Telegram group or on Telegram. You can also just follow us and stay up to date. Our X, I still am not used to saying that. Our X handle is at Reown _. And there's also at WalletConnect. So you can follow both of those things for updates on network and token related things. And then obviously all the tooling that we're building on the Reown side for app and wallet developers.
Thank you so much, Jess. And as we're reaching the Q&A, if anybody has questions, the format is fairly free. I noticed nobody wrote something in the chat, so if anybody wants to jump in and ask a question, please feel free to do that.
Your question list was so good, Asaf. You've covered everything.
I'm seeing Tomer's eyes, so and I know he has a question. I recognize this look. It's the look of two founders is like marriage, right? You already recognize the look in the eyes. So Tomer, I'm going to give you the spot.
Well, it's a fascinating conversation. Actually, I'm admiring the rapid growth of WalletConnect and now Reown. And the nice part about it, it was so organic. Like things grew so fast, and adoption over the years. And now stepping where we are today, I would love to ask about growth tactics. Like how do you look at the future and say, how do I grow at the same rate, in the same massive rate, and into adoption? It's much harder in such in such an adoption rate that you have today. So I'm super curious to know what are your lines of thoughts.
Definitely one of the biggest challenges that I have is that there's so much stuff that we would like to do or that we get asked to do or that I can spot problems in the industry and I'm like, oh, we could fix that. And so I think we have to be like very disciplined about what we choose to do and also about what we choose to partner in order to enable. So one of the really cool things I think about the WalletConnect network is that on the app side of the ecosystem, you have us and we build AppKit as a developer SDK. You also have a bunch of other SDKs that apps can integrate with. So we have partners like Privy, Dynamic, ThirdWeb, ConnectKit, RainbowKit. There's probably a bunch that I'm not mentioning. And so if you're an app developer, you can go to any one of those to use that functionality and still get access into the WalletConnect network. So part of it is also thinking, we don't necessarily need to have the whole market using AppKit. The purpose is the WalletConnect network. And so we partner really closely with a lot of those firms to make sure that they can continue to use WalletConnect and distribute it to people. There is definitely specific segments that some of those SDKs are really, really strong in. ThirdWeb is excellent in the gaming market, for example, and so we partner with them on a Unity SDK and other things, and we want to encourage that. At the same time, we have to think about like where we want to focus and what we should kind of be investing in and building towards. And there are a couple of like different frameworks that I use for that. One is to think about the different crypto ecosystems and chains that are out there. So WalletConnect is fully chain agnostic, but our app kit is a little bit more opinionated. So right now it supports EVM, Solana, and Bitcoin. And so one of the questions is that we're having a discussion about is like, okay, which ecosystem do we want to go and do that full flagship support, the on-ramps, the email embedded wallets, everything else for as a next ecosystem? With when we kind of like launch into that, and we did Solana last year, we had a great launch. We partnered with a bunch of different leading DeFi apps and DeFi wallets to kind of like launch into that ecosystem. So we have this like ecosystem framework of where we can think about growth. We have a lot of these like vertical segments that we think about, payments being one, where I sort of have a thesis that that's going to be an area of growth. We have this Unity SDK specifically for the gaming ecosystem, which we see a lot of interest in. DeFi is another one. So we kind of have to think about some of these segments and what we can build for them, but that hopefully is also generalizable to others. And then I think we also kind of on an even more tactical level and less from a product perspective, one of the things that I've tried to kind of make as a bit of a transition over the last year is much more about like how we work with partners and leverage their stories to tell about what we're doing. I think that the days of just like a brand account tweeting like we've built X, Y, and Z is kind of over. And there's nothing stronger than customers who can say, these are the benefits that we have from working with X. And so tactically thinking about how we can do that, how we can leverage relationships with foundations to make sure that our app kit can be distributed for free to their ecosystems, for example, is another kind of growth angle. We're still working on it. It's definitely not perfect. But I think that once you start to do some of these things, you benefit from word of mouth. People who are building an application look at their kind of potential competitors. They see maybe that they're using AppKit or that they've got WalletConnect enabled, and so then it makes logical sense for them to do the same. And then finally, I think it's just about like providing good support, something that historically I don't think we did a great job at, but we've invested a lot this year in developer relations, in customer support, and making sure that like we're really easily contactable if people have challenges and that we can listen to their feedback. And just building those really close customer relationships also means that when you have new things for people to try, and we've launched a bunch in the last few months around chain abstraction, gas sponsorship for apps, policies and permissions with smart sessions, all of these things. Once you've got good relationships with customers, it's much easier to pick up the phone and say, hey, can you try this new feature? Rather than just putting it out into the ether and hoping that it gets adopted.
Thank you.
I see some additional people added questions. So Brandon wrote, how are you thinking about the role Reown can play within the institutional landscape? It's a great question.
Brandon, let me know if this is wrong, but institutional, I'm reading as like institutional custodians and that sort of stuff, or a different kind of institutional?
Yeah, like just TradFi, custody, banking, that kind of world.
Yeah. So we've had quite a long history of working with like institutional pools of crypto. Fireblocks, for example, is probably one of our longest standing wallets. I think they've been on the network since 2019. And they use that to allow institutional customers to access DeFi, to do voting, staking, and engage with Web3 more broadly. I've definitely seen a like pretty marked uptick in interest from custodians over the last 6 months. I think we've reached a bit of a turning point where financial institutions weren't just interested in like holding and trading crypto, but they actually wanted to do things with that crypto. They wanted to be able to stake. They wanted to have an active role in governance in ecosystems. They wanted to be able to like, trade on DeFi, not just through like specific routes. And so we've had a lot more custodians come online by integrating WalletKit in the last 6 months, and we've got a few other kind of prominent ones coming online in the next quarter, which gives all of that capital access to Web3 in the same way that you can now access Web3 with like a mobile self-custodial wallet. So that's exciting for me because I think that's the more easy we can make it for institutions to do that, the more likely they are to fully embrace this as a technology rather than view it just as an asset that they can like stick in a custodian that feels like a bank and forget about it. So I think that where that's really what we're focused on is making sure that WalletKit works really well with a custodian setup, and there are a lot of like technical nuances to that. but making sure that then their users can access Web3 in the same way that everyone else can as well.
And
Awesome.
one
You.
last question from Kevin. Can you give your thoughts on how you see Reown helping facilitate payments, and what that user experience may look like?
So I think that there's all sorts of different types of payments, and I'll give you a few examples of things that we're excited about and working on. There's e-com payments, so like the concept of a crypto pay-in. I just go onto a website where I want to buy a book or anything else, and I can pay with crypto as part of that flow. We've already got quite a few payments companies using AppKit to enable that. It means that people can really easily connect their wallet. The app can request, the signing of messages or the signing of transactions using that technology. And for the end user, it's a very like seamless and intuitive experience. I think there's also a kind of non-sexy but kind of important component there of travel rule and other regulations, which mean that you have to now prove the ownership of a self-custodial wallet, for example, before you can interact with a regulated entity using that self-custodial wallet. So our sign in with Ethereum or sign in with X for other ecosystems functionality there is kind of important for some of this compliance stuff. I think the user experience there, though, is still pretty clunky. If you look at some of them, you have to choose a chain, choose an asset. There's only specific assets that you can use. Then, of course, not limited to payments, but you probably don't have enough native gas, so you've got to go somewhere else to get the native gas before you can make the payment. You can only do these like one-time payments, and a huge amount of pay-ins in payments more broadly is subscription-based. So there are a lot of like rough edges on that user experience today. We have a chain abstraction solution coming out that wallets can use so that I, as an end user, have 10 USDC on Optimism and 10 USDC on Arbitrum, but the merchant wants 20 USDC on Solana, and I can do all of that now in a single user op intent, and there's a bridge and swap that takes place at the back end, but I don't really need to think about it as an end user. We have gas sponsorship so that the merchant or the payment services provider can pay the gas fees on behalf of the user. That eliminates people, needing to go off platform to top up their wallet and things. So there's some innovation taking place there that I'm really excited about. Subscriptions, I think, is really important. When you think about the payments that you make, certainly if I look at my bank statement, a lot of them are my mobile phone direct debit, they're my Netflix account, my New York Times subscription. It's actually a pretty like meaningful amount. And to date, that's been kind of challenging in crypto because either you end up escrowing funds or you're giving pretty like broad permissions to an app to be able to access your crypto. I think with Pectra coming in, we built a standard called 7715. I'm getting now boringly technical. This is Asaf, to your question of how I talk to developers. I do know the standards. So we built this standard called 7715 that allows like policies and permissions for EVM wallet. So I can say, I will pay up to $20 USDC per week in this game. So I don't need to keep going back to my wallet to sign. I can just click in game to buy the asset or whatever that is. So I think there's a lot of innovation to take place on these like online non-card payment rails. We're also doing some innovation in the point of sale place. So like, how do I take my BitGet mobile wallet and buy coffee at the local coffee shop, and how do I make sure that the merchant is able to accept that and accept payments? So thinking about point of sale with some partners as well, and how we make that the self-custodial wallet world able to easily plug into the point of sale world. And then there are a whole host of other things in the B2B payment space, the payouts space. Payouts are something that I'm particularly excited about because I think this really opens up new corridors. If you think about a creator platform and the the rent that's extracted when a creator earns $100 on a marketplace, and then to get that back into their bank, they end up with $72 or something. I think it's extortionate. And so how do we set people up with wallets really easily so that they can just get paid in crypto and just last mile back into fiat if they need to? That's another kind of exciting payments use case, I think. So all in all, an awful lot. But I think that a lot of these user experiences we can make pretty big improvements on over the next 18 months. And hopefully that helps kind of drive the adoption of crypto payments overall as well.
Thank you so much, Jess. I mean, that was so educating and inspiring. And Brandon, I want to thank you as well in the GTM community for setting up this show. I think this is truly an opportunity to learn. We're planning to do that once a month. We opened up really strong. I hope we can keep up with this pace. So thank you everybody for joining. And Jess, thank you again. And Brandon, thank you.
Thank you
And
very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and hope to see a bunch of you in Denver. And keep building, Brandon.
Thank you. No, thank you guys. Without further ado, we'll conclude. Hope everybody has a great rest of your week.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.